Yeah, there's kind of two things going on. On one hand, it's the horrifying images that we're getting from those border regions. But behind those images is a lot of politics. This is a story that starts last year with the Belarusian presidential election, in which President Alexander Lukashenko, often called Europe's last dictator, won re-election in what most international observers say was a fraudulent election. Now, there were massive protests in Belarus against that fraudulent election, but the government had a massive crackdown against those protests. In response, the European Union adopted sanctions against Belarus, and the EU says that Belarus is now retaliating against the EU by flying over migrants from the Middle East, from countries like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, flying them to Minsk, busing them over to the Polish border, which is the EU's eastern border, and sending them across the border. So in a way, this doesn't really have much to do with Poland, at least in the motivations for it. It's about the EU as a whole. On the other hand, Poland has reacted very severely to these migrants crossing. International NGOs are saying that Poland is violating all kinds of rules about the treatment of asylum seekers and migrants. But the right-wing government in Poland, while it is undoubtedly facing a legitimate crisis at its border, it has every motivation to kind of exaggerate that crisis and inflame that crisis, because the Polish government is kind of on the back legs right now. It is having low approval ratings. It is facing a challenge from opposition parties, and it is at risk of a Polexit crisis erupting at any moment, in which it might look like the Polish government's rule of law violations and challenge to the primacy of EU law could be putting it on a path to being forced to exit the EU. 90% of Polish people don't want to see that happen. So this is coming at a good time politically for the Polish government, which is why a lot of people in Brussels are not entirely trusting the images and accounts we're getting from that border. International observers have not been allowed to go to the exclusion zone at the Poland-Belarus border, so most of the images and accounts that we're getting are from the Polish government, and the Polish government has every incentive to exaggerate what's happening there. Now, Council President Charles Michel is there in Warsaw today, meeting with Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. They are trying to come to an agreement about how the EU can help here. We have a weird situation where Poland is asking for EU help. The EU has offered help in the form of personnel, people from the Frontex border force going to the border and helping out. Poland has refused that offer. Essentially, they just want money to continue dealing with the situation themselves. And that is a common theme that you always see with Frontex, is that all these border countries want money from the EU to deal with these border crises, to deal with the EU's external border, but they don't want the actual personnel to come in. What needs to be kept in mind here is this is the EU's external border. Once the migrants cross into Poland, they don't want to go to Poland. Poland isn't a very welcoming place for migrants. They want to go to Germany, to France, to other countries. And Poland is part of the Schengen common border areas where you can cross borders without passports. So the migrants don't want to go to Poland. They think once they cross into Poland, they can continue on and go to other EU countries. So Poland says, hey, EU, you need to pay for this this border protection, because this is protecting all of the EU. They want the EU to pay for a border wall. And Charles Michel suggested that's maybe something the EU could consider. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, not so keen on that idea.
The EU, though, Dave, is considering some tangible action here, specifically regarding Belarus. What can you tell us?
Yeah, they're actually talking about expanding the sanctions against Belarus to the companies and people involved in this human trafficking. It looks pretty certain that they're going to target the Belarusian airline Belavia, but they may also target suppliers to that airline, a lot of which are Irish companies, actually. And they may even broaden it out to foreign airlines, Turkish airlines, airlines from the UAE, who are accused of actually flying these migrants over and at least kind of turning a blind eye to what's happening here. Now, that decision to at least expand the sanctions is expected to be taken today, but they won't actually discuss who those expanded sanctions will target until tomorrow and Friday, and we won't get a decision on this until Monday at the earliest. And of course, critics say in the meantime, the migrants are still kind of coming over, and that the EU is really reacting to this way too slowly.
Dave Keating, live for us in Brussels. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll have much more for you on this story later on during the hour.